Hi, and welcome to some flip notes from Flipped Classroom Education Solutions Limited. I'm David Shulman, and I just want to talk to you about Iago from Othello and address some of the possibilities of this question that has really plagued a lot of people about what drives him, what motivated him to cause such misery, such destruction, to have such a dire need for such brutal revenge, resulting in the deaths of just about all of the principal players within the text. Only really Cassio survives at the end of it in one piece. So, what is it that drives Iago? Why, Iago? Why did you do it, right? So, first of all, we need to address his stated reasons. He does tell us why. He says, firstly, that he has been passed over for a promotion. And we know that Cassio got the job that he desperately kind of wanted. So, there's a reason for him to do it. And then in his soliloquy, he talks about the fact that his thought abroad that betwixt my sheets he's done my office. That there are rumours that Othello has slept with Iago's wife, Amelia. And even though there's no real proof from it, and it's interesting that Iago says, that he will take it as if it has happened just because people are talking about it. So we have these reasons for him to hold a grudge against Othello. But they don't really hold close, they don't really hold up to scrutiny. The extent of the destruction that he creates, the hurt he creates to so many other people, all of the other people who come involved in this, as a way of him getting revenge, it just doesn't kind of work as a consequence for the actions that he created. So these are these are rationalizations, not justifications. He's trying to kind of come up with reasons for himself to justify why he does what he does, but it's not really true. So let's look at some more interesting possibilities. Maybe he's just plain evil. Perhaps Shakespeare just wrote him to be a malicious, malignant, bad person. There's a famous little note by the poet Coleridge in the side of the edition that he was looking at, which described Iago as, when he's rationalising or looking for reasons to hate Cassio in this case, that it was the motive hunting of motiveless malignancy. Now, one way of reading that is that he doesn't have any real motive. He's just malignant. He's bad. He's evil. Or could he even actually almost be the devil right at the end? Othello, as he tries, but just before he stabs Iago, he says, I look down towards his feet, but that's a fable. What he is he's looking for hooves on his feet as if he is the devil, but he knows it's not really literally true. But, is there the question, is he that simply born bad and born evil? Okay? Now, personally, I find that too simplistic. If he's evil, why? What turned him that way? And surely he still has to have some way or some higher motivation for causing him to do things the way that he did it. I'm not happy with evil, and there's some other more interesting possibilities. Jealousy permeates the play. Now, when we think of Othello, we think of the jealousy of Othello. Actually, I think the most important jealousy in the play is Iago's. And when we look at his soliloquy, when he says, For that I do suspect the lusty Moor hath leapt my seat, the thought whereof doth like a poisonous mineral gnaw at my inwards. I love that quote. He talks about just the thought of Othello having slept with Amelia eats him. It gnaws at his guts. It's like a poisonous mineral that's kind of like dissolving or corroding him from the inside. So he has this insecurity that he's being laughed at because he's been made a cockhold by Othello, that everybody's talking about it, everybody knows about this, and Othello has effectively, betrayed him in this way. And it's not really out of any concern for Amelia or any affection for her or any love for her. I doubt there's any of that at all, but it's really about his own insecurity that he's being mocked and how much this eats away at him because he's the jealous character. And so when he says to Othello, beware the green-eyed monster, it doth mock the meat it feeds upon, he knows this so well because he is being eaten or consumed by this jealousy, or has been. So he knows how irrational it makes him feel and kind of transposes that onto Othello. So, there's a good bit of justification for this. Here's another reason. There's an interesting little quotation in Othello's Iago's first soliloquy. Just as the fop Roderigo leaves, he says, when I wouldn't spend any time with him, for I mine own gain knowledge should profane, I would time expend with such a snipe, but for my sport and profit. My sport. And I just wonder if a big part of the reason why Iago does what he does is just for the thrill of doing it. But it's more than that. He is exceptionally talented in the way that he can play and manipulate other people. He can do it through conniving, scheming kind of means, but he can also do it spontaneously. He can twist given circumstances to fit into his grander schemes. He's almost like a conductor or a marionette operator as he works in around and moves all of these characters and has them blame and other factors put onto them, or suspicion or mistrust, all the way through. He's very, very good at what he does. And you have to wonder, does he get a thrill from being able to practice his skills to such a high level? Is the fact that he is able to do it, and he feels kind of alive and a joy from doing it, is that strong enough, or one of his real motivations? And when we look at this, it seems a bit of a stretch taking it from this one quotation, but look at the fact that he even seems to enjoy talking to the audience, breaking the fourth wall through his soliloquy and saying, and what's he then that says that I'm a villain? He talks about how nobody can say that he's doing anything wrong. He almost boasts. In fact, he does boast about how he's created this great plan, and at the same time, nobody can really prove that he's doing anything wrong, and his advice is all good, and it's all watertight. How am I a villain? And so he's so pleased with his own cunning deceptiveness. He's enjoying himself there, and he's even enjoying it to the point where he wants to tell the audience, look at me, look how clever I am. And I think there's also a wee hint of that in the green-eyed monster quote when he says, beware of my lord of jealousy. It's the green-eyed monster. I think he's giving a little bit of hey, are you clever enough to figure out that I'm actually the monstrous force here? So I think there's a case for that. But, what about something else? Well, what about his unrequited love for Othello? Could it be that he has a homoerotic attraction for Othello, and his inability to kind of process this leads him to kind of striking out against him? Now, it seems a bit of a stretch, this reading. Some people will argue this. A couple of little pieces of evidence. People have drawn attention to the way he responds when finally Othello commits to killing Desdemona, and he commits all of his energies, all of his resources to helping him along. He gets down on his knees with Othello, and he says, I am your own forever. People have sort of drawn attention to that line and says, here is really an unrequited, expression of his love for Othello. And we can look at another detail as well. And what I think is the worst piece of evidence that Iago puts in front of Othello of Desdemona's unfaithfulness. But by this stage, Othello is so blinded and so convinced that he's going to believe everything. But he talks, Iago says about the night that he slept in a bed with Cassio. And he talks about all of the things that Cassio said and the way that he behaved in a completely unrealistic way. But if you look at the way that he describes this, there is some evidence in here of him having, or playing out in some ways, fantasies about other men. So it says, and then, sir, I lay with Cassio lately, and then, sir, would he gripe and wring my hand and cry, oh, sweet creature, and then kiss me hard, as if he plucked out the kisses up by the roots, and then grew upon my lips, and then he laid his leg over my thigh and sighed and kissed, etc. And of course, all of this is completely made up. It's mere fantasy. But the fact that he's building the story in this way perhaps gives a little bit of weight or evidence to that theory. Okay? And what about the fact that he's just a misogynist? He hates women. And the fact that he hates women is the reason that he wants to destroy Desdemona, in some ways because she kind of is a symbol of the perfection in a sense. She is beautiful, accomplished, intelligent, loyal, and all of these sorts of things. So he wants to destroy her because of this. And if you look at the little interaction in Act 2, when he talks about the nature of what women are like, he jokes along, and talks about all of their contradictions, all of their deceits, all of those things. How they are pictures out of doors, bells in your parlours, wildcats in your kitchen, saints in your injuries, devils being offended, all this sort of stuff. There's a suggestion there that he has like a hatred of women, and this hatred of women is the thing that drives him to go about these acts of death and destruction. But it's not only women he kills, so I don't know. Another reading is that it's that his motivation really comes from his racism and the fact that he can't really process the fact that Othello is his superior, is in a position of power over him, is looked upon and admired by all of Venice. And there's a little bit of evidence for this because he does use racial slurs, particularly in Act 1 when they're back in Venice. And he draws attentions to Othello's skin colour. There's the old black ram is topping your white ewe quotation. But he only really uses this language to Roderigo and to Brabantio, and at a point where he's trying to kind of manipulate them at that point as well. You never hear of it in his soliloquies, and that's the point where he is being the most kind of honest. So I'm not convinced about that either, but perhaps it plays the point of it, plays a part in it. And playing a part in it's the whole thing, because right at the outset, you kind of lead down a false way of thinking about this. What is Iago's motivation? That's a singular thing. Beware of, either or questions. Is it this or is it that? They're tyrannous. Is it one or is it the other? It can always be neither or both. Or it can be a bit of one, most of one, and a little bit of the other. It's much more complex than that. I think if you want to think about Othello's motivations, what you really need is you need to build yourself a good old pie chart, and you need to think about all of these different these reasons and other ones you can think of as well, and other ones that other people will talk about, and you think, what sits here as the biggest and most significant? What do you think might be a minor influence? What might not be there at all? But if it's me, and if I put my money on it, I think that ultimately it's the fact that he loves being able to execute the skill that comes so naturally to him to create this chaos, because he's so very, very talented at it, and the manipulation that he puts into place is an expression of that talent. That's really the thrill that he gets from it, and what really drives him. And everything else for me is a secondary feature, but I'm sure lots of other people and cleverer people than me will argue or give better reasons against that reading. But anyway, there's my thoughts. Why Iago? Why'd you do it? That's what I reckon. I'll see you later.